Find her. Those were the only words the Alpha King's son spoke before slipping back into silence. The first time it happened, the royal healers called it a miracle. The second time, they called it impossible. By the third time, no one in Mooncrest Kingdom knew what to believe anymore. 6-year-old Lucas Blackthorn lay beneath layers of silver blankets inside the highest tower of Blackthorn Palace, his small body still and pale against the enormous bed that had once belonged to kings. Candles flickered along the stone walls, casting warm light across shelves crowded with medicines, herbs, and remedies gathered from every corner of the Northern Territories. Nothing had worked. Not the most gifted healers. Not the rarest medicines. Not the blessings whispered beneath the full moon. Every answer they found seemed to vanish like mist before sunrise. Outside the tower, winter winds swept across the mountains, rattling the palace windows. Inside, the air felt heavy with worry. Alpha King Rowan Blackthorn stood beside his son's bed without moving. At 32 years old, Rowan was the most feared ruler in the territories. Rival packs lowered their eyes when he entered a room. Warriors twice his age followed his commands without question. Yet none of that power mattered here. None of it could help the small boy lying before him. Lucas's breathing remained soft and steady, but distant somehow, as if part of him was somewhere far away. Rowan's silver eyes never left his son's face. 3 times now, Lucas had opened his eyes after days of silence. 3 times, he had looked at the room as though searching for someone hidden among the shadows. 3 times, he had whispered the same 2 words. Find her. Then he would drift away again. Who is she? Rowan had asked countless times. No answer ever came. Across the room, the kingdom's finest healers stood quietly. Their confidence had disappeared weeks ago. They avoided the king's gaze now. Some stared at the floor. Others pretended to study books they had already read 100 times. None wanted to admit the truth. They had failed. Again. Finally, an elderly healer cleared his throat. Your Majesty, he said carefully, we have exhausted every known treatment. The words settled heavily over the room. Rowan remained silent. The healer continued anyway. There may be one final option. Several heads turned. Hope flickered briefly through the chamber. There is a list, the healer said. A registry of every unmated Omega in the kingdom. Some possess unusual gifts. Rare gifts. Abilities that were never fully studied. Rowan slowly looked up. You're asking me to place my son's life in the hands of strangers? I'm asking you not to give up. Silence followed. Then, before anyone could speak again, Lucas suddenly stirred. Every person in the room froze. The boy's eyes opened. For the briefest moment, they seemed brighter than the candlelight itself. His lips parted. Rowan stepped forward instantly. Lucas. The child's gaze drifted toward the window, beyond the mountains, beyond the palace, as if he could see someone far away. Then, in a voice barely louder than a whisper, he spoke. She's coming. The room remained silent long after Lucas closed his eyes again. No one moved. No one spoke. Even the flames of the candles seemed frozen in place. Rowan stood beside the bed, staring at his son as if willing him to wake again. She is coming. The words echoed through his mind. Not find her. Not help her. She is coming. It was the first new thing Lucas had said in months, and somehow it unsettled Rowan more than anything before. Across the room, the healers exchanged nervous glances. Some looked hopeful. Others looked frightened. The elderly healer finally stepped forward. Your Majesty, he said softly, I believe the boy is speaking about someone specific. Rowan turned his gaze toward him. Then tell me who. The old man hesitated. I do not know. Rowan's jaw tightened. The answer did not help. Nothing helped anymore. Outside, snow drifted past the tower windows, covering the palace grounds in white. Winter had arrived early this year. The kingdom seemed quieter than usual, as if the land itself was waiting for something. Hours later, Rowan sat alone in the royal council chamber. A fire crackled inside the stone hearth, but it did little to warm the room. Documents covered the massive oak table before him. Reports from healers, messages from neighboring packs, requests for audiences he had ignored for weeks. None of it mattered. Only Lucas mattered. A knock interrupted his thoughts. Enter. Commander Ethan Graves stepped inside. Tall and broad-shouldered, Ethan had served Rowan for more than a decade. He was one of the few people who spoke honestly to the Alpha King. The registry is ready, Ethan said. Rowan looked up. Already. Every unmated Omega in the Northern Territories. Every healer. Every rumored gifted soul. Every name we could find. Ethan placed a thick leather folder on the table. Rowan stared at it for several seconds before opening it. Hundreds of names filled the pages. Most were ordinary. Some carried notes about minor healing talents or herbal knowledge. Then something caught his attention. A single page marked with a red seal. Rowan pulled it free. Emily Carter. Age, 23. Residence, Gray Hollow Settlement. Status, wolfless Omega. Rowan frowned. Wolfless. Even among Omegas, that was rare. His eyes moved lower. Additional note. Subject displays unusual emotional sensitivity. Multiple reports describe unexplained calming effects on animals and injured wolves. No formal training. No known pack affiliation. Ethan folded his arms. Most people dismissed the reports. Rowan continued reading. Abandoned by her birth pack at 16. Lives alone. Works odd jobs in nearby settlements. Considered harmless. Considered insignificant. Rowan stared at the final line. Then why is her file marked with a royal seal? Ethan hesitated. Because Lucas spoke her name. The room seemed to grow still. Rowan slowly lifted his eyes. What did you say? 3 weeks ago, during one of his brief awakenings. Ethan's voice lowered. The healers thought it was nonsense at first. A dream. But the name was recorded. Rowan felt something tighten inside his chest. And no one told me. At the time, no one knew she was real. Ethan slid a second document across the table. Until yesterday. Rowan looked down at the page. A recent report from Gray Hollow. Witnesses claimed a frightened horse had calmed instantly after a young woman touched its neck. A wounded wolf had stopped trembling in her presence. Small things. Strange things. Impossible things. Rowan read every word. Then he stood. Prepare a royal escort. Ethan blinked. Tonight. Rowan's silver eyes hardened. If my son has been calling for her all this time, then we have already waited too long. Far beyond the palace walls, more than 200 miles away, Emily Carter stepped out into the snowy evening carrying a basket of supplies. She had no idea that riders were already crossing the kingdom toward her. And she certainly did not know that the fate of the Alpha King's son was beginning to pull her toward Blackthorn Palace. Emily Carter had learned long ago that people rarely looked at her twice. In Gray Hollow, that suited her just fine. The settlement sat between rolling hills and dense pine forests nearly 200 miles from Blackthorn Palace, far enough away from royal affairs that most residents cared more about the weather than politics. Emily preferred it that way. She kept her head down, worked hard, and asked for very little. The next morning, pale winter sunlight filtered through the frosted windows of the small cabin she rented on the edge of town. Emily tied her light brown hair back and prepared for another ordinary day. At 23, she had grown used to being overlooked. Being a wolfless Omega meant people often assumed she was weak, fragile, or somehow incomplete. Years ago, those assumptions had hurt. Now they simply felt familiar. She stepped outside carrying a bucket of feed for the animals belonging to a neighboring farmer. The air was cold enough to sting her cheeks, and fresh snow covered the ground in a smooth blanket of white. As she crossed the yard, a nervous golden retriever darted from behind a shed. The dog had been restless for days after a recent storm. Most people could not get near him. Emily crouched slowly. "Hey there," she whispered. The dog hesitated. His ears twitched. Then, as always seemed to happen around her, the tension left him. Within seconds, he trotted forward and pressed his head against her hand. Emily smiled and scratched behind his ears. She never understood why animals trusted her so easily. They just did. By noon, she had delivered supplies, helped an elderly neighbor repair a fence, and spent nearly an hour calming a frightened horse that had slipped free from its stable. The horse settled almost immediately after Emily rested her hand against its neck. Several townspeople noticed. Most simply shook their heads. They had seen similar things before. "You should have been born a healer," old Mrs. Dawson said as Emily finished securing the stable gate. Emily laughed softly. "I do not think real healers would agree." Mrs. Dawson smiled. Maybe they would if they were paying attention. Emily appreciated the kindness, but she dismissed the comment. Real healers trained for years. They studied medicine, herbs, and healing gifts. Emily possessed none of those things. She only seemed to make others feel calm. That hardly felt important. Later that afternoon, she returned home carrying groceries wrapped in brown paper. Snowflakes drifted lazily from the sky. Everything felt peaceful, ordinary, safe. Then she noticed something unusual. Hoofprints. Fresh ones. Large horses. Several of them. Her steps slowed. Few travelers came this far during winter. A strange feeling settled in her chest. Not fear exactly. More like anticipation she could not explain. As she reached her cabin, she stopped completely. For riders waited outside. Their horses stood perfectly still despite the falling snow. The men wore dark cloaks marked with a silver crest she recognized immediately. The royal crest of Blackthorn Palace. Emily blinked. For a moment she wondered if they had the wrong house. Then one of the riders stepped forward and lowered his hood. "Emily Carter?" he asked. She tightened her grip on the grocery bag. "Yes." The man exchanged a glance with the others. Relief crossed his face. "Thank the moon goddess." Emily frowned. "Why?" The rider took a careful breath. "Because the Alpha King has been searching for you." For several seconds, Emily simply stared at the royal riders. She was certain she had misunderstood. People like the Alpha King did not search for people like her. The idea was almost laughable. "There must be some mistake," she said quietly. The lead rider shook his head. "There is no mistake, Miss Carter." Snow drifted between them as the small crowd of curious neighbors began gathering farther down the road. Grey Hollow was not a place where royal messengers appeared every day. Emily could already feel dozens of eyes watching from nearby windows. "Why would the Alpha King want me?" she asked. The rider hesitated, as though searching for the right words. "His son is ill." Emily frowned. Everyone in the Northern Territories knew about Prince Lucas. Rumors had spread for months. Some claimed he suffered from a rare sickness. Others whispered about curses and ancient magic. Nobody seemed to know the truth. "I am not a healer," Emily replied. "Then perhaps you should tell that to the prince." The rider's answer caught her off guard. "What does that mean?" she asked. "The prince has spoken your name." A cold breeze swept across the snowy road. Emily blinked. "That is impossible." "We thought so too." The rider reached inside his cloak and removed a folded parchment bearing the royal seal. "The prince mentioned your name weeks ago. More than once." Emily felt her heartbeat quicken. She had never been to Blackthorn Palace. She had never met the royal family. She had never even traveled farther north than the neighboring county. "I do not understand," she whispered. "Neither do we." The rider offered the parchment. "But the Alpha King wishes to understand. And right now, his son is running out of time." Emily lowered her gaze to the document. The seal alone was enough to confirm its authenticity. No one would forge a royal summons. Not successfully. Around her, the settlement had grown unusually quiet. Even the neighbors seemed to sense something important was happening. Emily swallowed hard. For years she had built a simple life here. Predictable. Safe. Small. Now that life suddenly felt fragile, as though it were standing at the edge of something vast and unknown. "If I refuse?" she asked softly. The rider surprised her by smiling. "Then we ride away." Emily looked up. "That is all. His Majesty requested your presence. He did not order it." That answer somehow unsettled her more. She had expected demands. Commands. Pressure. Instead, she had been given a choice. The rider glanced toward the darkening sky. "We leave at sunrise tomorrow. If you come, we will be waiting." Then he stepped back and mounted his horse. One by one, the others followed. Within moments, they were moving toward the town inn at the center of Grey Hollow. Emily remained standing alone in the snow. The grocery bag hung forgotten at her side. Questions swirled through her mind. Why her? Why now? And how could a child she had never met possibly know her name? As the last rider disappeared around the corner, a strange sensation brushed across her chest. Warm, gentle, familiar somehow. Then, without warning, an image flashed through her mind. A young boy with silver eyes smiling at her, as if he had known her forever. Emily froze. The vision vanished instantly, but the feeling remained. And for the first time since the royal riders arrived, she began to wonder if this journey had started long before any of them realized. Emily barely slept that night. The image of the silver-eyed boy lingered in her thoughts long after darkness settled over Grey Hollow. She tried to convince herself it had been nothing more than an overactive imagination. After all, she had spent the evening hearing impossible stories about a prince who somehow knew her name. Anyone would have strange thoughts after that. Yet every time she closed her eyes, she felt the same quiet warmth she had experienced outside her cabin. It was not frightening. If anything, It felt oddly comforting. Before dawn, Emily lit a small lantern and sat by the window watching snow drift across the empty road. The settlement remained asleep beneath the pale blue glow of early morning. For years, this view had been her entire world. The familiar cabins, the winding paths, the distant tree line. Leaving it behind should have felt terrifying. Instead, she felt something she had not experienced in a very long time. Curiosity. By sunrise, the royal riders were waiting exactly where they had promised. Emily carried a single travel bag over her shoulder. Everything she owned fit inside it. A few clothes, a worn journal, a silver pendant that had belonged to her mother. Nothing else seemed important enough to bring. Mrs. Dawson wrapped her in a warm hug before she left. "You come back and tell us everything," the older woman said. Emily smiled. "If there is anything to tell." "Trust me," Mrs. Dawson replied. "There will be." Hours later, Grey Hollow had disappeared behind them. The royal escort moved steadily through snow-covered forests and frozen valleys. Emily rode beside the lead rider, whose name she had learned was Marcus Reed. Unlike what she expected from a royal soldier, Marcus was surprisingly friendly. He answered her questions whenever he could. Unfortunately, most of his answers only created more questions. "How long has the prince been sick?" Emily asked during the second day of travel. Marcus glanced toward the road ahead. "Almost 7 months." Emily frowned. "And no healer has helped him?" "Some have helped temporarily." Marcus paused. "None have solved whatever is happening." Emily looked down at the reins in her hands. "Then why does everyone think I can?" Marcus was quiet for several seconds. "Honestly, yes. Most people do not." Emily looked up. "What?" "The healers at the palace are divided. Some believe this is a waste of time." His expression softened. "But the prince keeps asking for you." Emily felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She had never wanted responsibility for anyone's hopes, especially not a kingdom's. By the third evening, the mountains surrounding Blackthorn territory rose along the horizon. Towering peaks stretched toward the sky, their snow-covered ridges glowing gold beneath the setting sun. Emily had never seen anything so beautiful, and so intimidating. The closer they came, the stronger that strange warmth inside her chest seemed to grow. It happened whenever she looked toward the distant mountains, as though something there was calling to her. Shortly before sunset, the palace finally appeared. Massive stone walls stood atop a ridge overlooking the valley below. Tall towers pierced the winter sky. Hundreds of windows reflected the fading sunlight like scattered stars. Emily stared in silence. It looked less like a palace and more like an entire city carved from stone. "Welcome to Blackthorn Palace," Marcus said. Emily swallowed nervously. As the gates slowly opened, she told herself to stay calm. She was just an ordinary woman from a forgotten settlement. She had no healing gift, no special destiny, no reason to matter in a place like this. Yet at that exact moment, hundreds of feet above them in the highest tower, Lucas suddenly opened his eyes. A smile appeared on his face, and for the first time in weeks, he sat upright on his own. The news spread through Blackthorn Palace faster than a winter storm. By the time Emily stepped through the grand entrance hall, servants, guards, and healers were already whispering about the impossible change in the prince. For 7 months, Lucas had barely left his bed. Yet less than an hour after her arrival, he had sat up on his own. No one understood how. Emily certainly did not. She followed Marcus through long stone corridors lined with silver banners and towering windows. Everything felt enormous. Every footstep echoed. Every doorway seemed taller than the last. She tried not to stare, but it was impossible. Grey Hollow suddenly felt very far away. At last they stopped outside a pair of carved oak doors guarded by 2 royal sentinels. Marcus turned toward her. "The Alpha King is inside." Emily's stomach tightened. She had spent the entire journey trying not to think about this moment. Now it had arrived. One of the guards pushed the doors open. The chamber beyond was warm and surprisingly quiet. A fire burned inside a massive stone hearth. Books filled the shelves along the walls. Maps covered a large table near the windows. Standing beside it was Rowan Blackthorn. Emily immediately understood why people spoke about him in whispers. He was taller than she expected, with dark hair, silver eyes, and a presence that seemed to fill the room without effort. Yet what surprised her most was not his strength. It was the exhaustion. She could see it plainly. The sleepless nights. The constant worry. The weight of watching someone he loved suffer while being unable to help. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Rowan studied her carefully. Emily fought the urge to look away. Finally, he broke the silence. You are Emily Carter. Yes, Your Majesty. Rowan nodded once. Thank you for coming. The words caught her off guard. She had expected suspicion, perhaps even hostility, not gratitude. I am not sure I can help, she admitted. Neither am I. His honesty surprised her even more. Rowan glanced toward the door on the far side of the chamber. But my son believes you can. Before Emily could respond, the door suddenly swung open. Small footsteps rushed across the floor. A boy with silver eyes appeared in the doorway. Lucas. Emily recognized him instantly. He looked exactly like the child from her vision. The prince stopped several feet away. For a few seconds, he simply stared at her. His eyes widened. Then a smile slowly spread across his face. Not the smile of someone meeting a stranger. The smile of someone finally finding something he had lost. Emily felt that strange warmth surge through her chest again, stronger than ever before. Lucas took another step forward. Then another. The room fell completely silent. Rowan straightened. The healers near the doorway watched with disbelief. For months the prince had barely spoken to anyone. Now he seemed unable to look away from Emily. I knew you would come, Lucas said softly. Emily swallowed. Have we met before? The boy tilted his head. Not yet. Several healers exchanged confused looks. Emily felt equally confused. I do not understand. Lucas smiled again. I remember you from the dream place. The room grew still. Emily stared at him. Rowan stared at him. Nobody knew what to say. Then Lucas walked directly toward her and gently took her hand. The moment their fingers touched, a brilliant silver symbol flashed briefly across the inside of Emily's wrist. It vanished almost instantly, but not before Rowan saw it. And the expression on the Alpha King's face changed completely. The silver symbol disappeared so quickly that Emily almost convinced herself she had imagined it. Almost. The warmth remained on her wrist long after the light vanished. Lucas still held her hand, smiling as though nothing unusual had happened. Around them, however, the atmosphere inside the room had changed completely. The healers stared in stunned silence. Rowan's gaze remained fixed on Emily's wrist. His expression had become unreadable. What was that? One of the healers finally whispered. No one answered. Emily slowly looked down at her arm. There was nothing there now. No mark. No glow. Just pale skin. I do not know, she admitted. Lucas squeezed her hand gently. It came back. Emily looked at him. Came back. The boy nodded. I told them about it. Several healers exchanged confused glances. Rowan stepped forward. Lucas. The prince turned toward his father. The lady from the dream had the same symbol. Silence followed. Emily felt her pulse quicken. Dream? She asked softly. Lucas nodded again. I kept seeing a forest full of silver light. You were always there. His voice carried the simple certainty only children possessed. You would sit beside me and tell me everything was going to be okay. Emily stared at him. A strange ache settled inside her chest. Not fear. Not confusion. Something closer to recognition. As though part of her wanted to remember something she could not quite reach. Rowan noticed the expression on her face. You have seen him before. It was not a question. Emily hesitated. Then she slowly nodded. Only once. Every eye turned toward her. Last night, she explained. After the royal riders arrived. I saw a boy with silver eyes. Lucas smiled immediately. See. One of the healers stepped forward. Shared visions are impossible. Another healer shook his head. So is everything that has happened since she arrived. The discussion grew louder. Arguments filled the room. Explanations collided with doubts. Emily barely heard any of it. Her attention had drifted toward a painting hanging above the fireplace. The portrait depicted a woman dressed in silver robes standing beneath a moonlit sky. Something about the image felt familiar. Uncomfortably familiar. Who is she? Emily asked. The room fell quiet again. Rowan followed her gaze toward the portrait. For a moment his expression darkened. That is Queen Evelyn. Your wife? Emily asked. Rowan nodded once. Lucas's mother. The prince's smile faded slightly. Emily immediately regretted the question. I am sorry. You did not know. Rowan's voice remained calm, but grief lingered beneath the words. Emily looked back toward the portrait. The queen's silver robes contained a pattern woven across the sleeves. A symbol. The same symbol she had seen flash across her wrist moments earlier. Her breath caught. Wait. She pointed toward the painting. That mark. Rowan turned sharply. What about it? Emily stepped closer. It is the same. The room became completely still. Several healers rushed toward the portrait. One elderly scholar adjusted his glasses and stared at the painted symbol. His face slowly drained of color. That cannot be possible. Rowan's eyes narrowed. Explain. The scholar swallowed hard. Your Majesty, that symbol does not belong to Queen Evelyn. Then whose is it? The old scholar looked directly at Emily. It belongs to a bloodline that vanished nearly 300 years ago. Emily felt the warmth return to her wrist. Stronger this time. The scholar's hands trembled. The bloodline of the Moonkeepers. Then, before anyone could say another word, Lucas suddenly grabbed his chest and gasped. The warmth around Emily vanished instantly, and every candle in the room flickered at the exact same moment. The room erupted into motion. Healers rushed toward Lucas, while servants hurried to relight the candles that had dimmed unexpectedly. Rowan reached his son first, kneeling beside him as concern flashed across his face. Lucas. The boy's breathing had become shallow. Not painful, not frightened, just distant again, as though something invisible were pulling his attention somewhere far beyond the walls of the palace. Emily's heart pounded. The strange warmth she had felt since arriving was gone. In its place came an unsettling emptiness. Lucas slowly turned his head toward her. His silver eyes looked unfocused. It found me again, he whispered. Rowan exchanged a troubled glance with the healers. What found you? Lucas did not answer immediately. Instead, his gaze remained fixed on Emily, the shadow in the dream place. A chill swept through the room despite the roaring fire. The elderly scholar stepped forward. Moonkeepers recorded something similar in their writings. Rowan looked up sharply. What writings? Ancient accounts. The scholar's voice trembled with excitement and fear. They believed certain gifted bloodlines could walk between the waking world and the dream world. They protected children whose spirits became trapped between the two. Emily stared at him. Trapped? The scholar nodded slowly. The prince may not be suffering from an illness at all. Silence followed. Then realization spread across several faces at once. Rowan rose to his feet. You are saying his spirit is somewhere else. Partially, the scholar replied. And every time he drifts farther away, his body weakens here. Emily looked toward Lucas. Suddenly his words from earlier made more sense. The dream place. The silver forest. The feeling that she somehow knew him despite never meeting him. None of it felt random anymore. Lucas reached weakly toward her. You know the way. Emily blinked. What way? The path. His eyes began to close. You always showed me. Rowan immediately stepped closer. Emily. She looked up. The Alpha King's calm expression had finally cracked. Beneath the strength and authority was something much simpler. A father terrified of losing his child. If there is anything you know, Rowan said quietly. Anything at all, tell me. Emily wished she had an answer. Instead, she shook her head. I do not understand any of this. Then the warmth returned. Not on her wrist this time. In the silver pendant hanging around her neck. The one that had belonged to her mother. The metal suddenly felt warm against her skin. Emily instinctively grabbed it. The moment her fingers closed around the pendant, a flood of images raced through her mind. A forest glowing with silver light. Ancient stone arches beneath a moonlit sky. A small boy laughing as he ran through trees that shimmered like stars. And a woman's voice. Gentle. Familiar. You already know the path. Emily gasped and stumbled backward. Rowan caught her before she could fall. The vision vanished. The room returned. Yet one image remained perfectly clear. A silver arch standing deep within the dream forest. Emily looked at Lucas. Then at Rowan. I think I saw where he is. Every person in the chamber froze. The scholar's eyes widened. Rowan's grip tightened slightly. Where? Emily took a shaky breath. I do not know exactly, but I think part of Lucas is trapped somewhere beyond this world. The room fell silent. Then the scholar whispered words that made everyone stare. The moon gate. Emily looked at him. What is that? The old scholar swallowed hard. According to legend, it is the doorway between worlds. He glanced toward Lucas. And if the prince is truly there, only a moonkeeper can bring him home. No one slept that night. While healers remained beside Lucas and scholars searched ancient records, Emily sat alone in the palace observatory beneath a ceiling of glass and stars. The silver pendant rested in her hands. Every time she closed her eyes, She saw the same place. The silver forest. The shining archway. The path Lucas had described. For the first time in her life, she stopped questioning whether the visions were real. Somewhere deep inside, she already knew the answer. Just before dawn, the warmth returned stronger than ever. It spread from the pendant into her hands, then through her chest like sunlight after a long winter. Images filled her mind once more, but this time they were clearer. She saw a woman standing beneath the moon gate. She wore silver robes identical to those in the portrait. Her eyes were kind, familiar. The woman smiled. "You were never wolfless, Emily." The words seemed to echo through her entire being. "Your gift was sleeping until it was needed." Emily felt tears gather in her eyes. "Who are you?" The woman touched the silver symbol glowing upon her wrist. "A keeper, just like you." Then the vision shifted. Emily saw Lucas standing alone near the silver arch. He was not frightened. He was waiting for someone to find him. The moment she saw him, a thread of silver light stretched between them. Instinctively, Emily reached forward. The thread brightened. Far below in the tower chamber, Lucas suddenly opened his eyes. At sunrise, the entire palace gathered outside the prince's room. Rowan stood closest to the bed, his expression tense. The healers watched silently. The scholars held their breath. Emily stepped forward. She did not know exactly what she was doing. She only followed the feeling inside her heart. She gently placed one hand over Lucas's. The silver symbol appeared once more, brighter than before. Warm light filled the room. No one spoke. No one moved. For a brief moment, Emily felt herself standing within the silver forest again. She saw Lucas smiling beside the moon gate. "It is time to come home," she whispered. The boy nodded. The silver arch dissolved into thousands of shimmering lights that drifted into the sky like stars. Then everything faded. The palace room returned. The warmth settled. The light disappeared. Silence followed. Long, uncertain silence. Then Lucas sat up. Not slowly. Not weakly. He simply sat up as though waking from an ordinary nap. A smile spread across his face. "I am hungry." The room erupted with relieved laughter and tears. Several healers nearly collapsed into chairs. The scholars stared in amazement. Rowan remained frozen for a second before crossing the room and pulling his son into a fierce embrace. Lucas laughed. "Dad, I am okay." For the first time in 7 months, everyone believed it. Later that afternoon, sunlight poured through the palace windows, while Lucas ran through the corridors with more energy than anyone had seen in months. Emily stood quietly near a balcony overlooking the snow-covered valley. She was preparing to leave when footsteps approached behind her. Rowan stopped beside her. For a moment, they simply watched the mountains together. "You saved my son," he said. Emily smiled softly. "I think he found his own way back." Rowan shook his head. "No, he found you." Below them, Lucas spotted Emily and immediately waved. "Do not leave," he shouted. "You are family now." Emily laughed through unexpected tears. Rowan looked at her, then toward his son. The winter sun reflected in his silver eyes. "Perhaps," he said quietly, "he is right."